Welcome to the Fire Sprinkler Podcast with Chris and Logan.
AGF has designed and manufactured unique fire sprinkler products for over 35 years, including heated drum drips, automatic air vents, and the original test and drain valve. AGF is pleased to announce our newest product, the Flood Eliminator. Developed with input from engineers and contractors in the fire protection industry, the Flood Eliminator prevents catastrophic flooding due to a broken drum drip. Learn more about the Flood Eliminator and all of AGF's products at agfmfg.com.
Like and subscribe.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. On this episode, I have Jim McHugh from AGF Manufacturing. They've got a couple new products out and we're going to learn about them. So we're not getting into too much of a kind of introduction. Everybody knows Jim. Jim, how's it going today?
Very good, Chris. Thanks for having me on again.
No problem. So we've got 3 or 4 or 5 or as many as you want to talk about and as much time as you have products that we're going to learn about today. And I think we're going to start with the 2511A test and drain.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Before we get into there, how have things been on the south side of the border with everything that's been going on lately?
It's been a long, strange trip. I mean, that song definitely comes to mind a lot. This has been a unique year. I mean, AGF had the good fortune of, because we're involved in life safety, we didn't have to close. So we kept open the whole time. We did shift and adjust some of our man hours. Certainly, we let everyone in our production area change to a flex schedule. So we actually are traditionally kind of a 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. company. And we went to a 4 a.m. to 8 p.m. company based off how everybody wanted to work and distancing in the assembly areas. And so that worked. And then our staff, like the office staff, our engineering company and things like that, they flexed as well. And it was interesting. People came back to the office a lot sooner than I even thought they would, just because we're a small company, kind of a family operation.
Yep.
So, and we've kept up that mentality. We've let people flex and choose surreptitiously. We were able, right before COVID hit, we had just done a big computer upgrade and a telephone to voice over IP upgrade.
Right.
And I can tell you, I certainly had no intention of knowing why, that this was coming. And then it worked out perfectly because everybody was able to move to remote work with almost no interruption. So that was fortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have been, you guys had set up your training facility, the AGF University.
Yeah.
You guys pretty seamlessly rolled it right into a digital online format, which was great.
We had AGFU had really just started taking off, and we were just starting to do some webinars. And I mean, I think you were one of the first discussions we had when I did the podcast the last time.
Right.
And it also invested a lot of time, money, and effort with General Air setting up an in-person training facility that's now, it's probably one of the best in the country.
Right.
And because of that, we really did. You're so correct. And it kind of seamlessly just rolled into this. And then version 2 of it is actually being prepared for launching, where we will have self-guided training programs. Ellen and Abby have been able to use this year and the experience of all the different computer formats and webinar formats and timing between our CEU classes, our Blitz classes, where we do these little 15-minute 6-slide classes focused on a special product. They've made all these different contents into a kind of a curriculum, and they're launching kind of the next iteration of AGFU. We just launched the new website. This was a great opportunity for us to do a complete revamp of the AGF Manufacturing website. And I got my first new email since 1996. I've had the same email address of jmchugh@testanddrain.com, and we changed it just this last month to now I'm jmchugh@agfmfg.com. So the old one works, but It's been wild to have the same email address for 30-something years.
That's something that's like 25 years almost. That's 25 years. That's ridiculous, actually. That's impressive. That's got to be a record. I mean, you and Bill Gates probably have the same. Like,
I mean, ironically, when I came out of college in '93, the company was founded back in the '80s, but my father wasn't all that in tune to the internet.
Right.
And coming out of college, the internet was still just kind of getting up and rolling in the early '90s. And on a whim, I had gone in and registered a bunch of things. And I remember, like, I had an Earthlink address, and then I had done the AGF website, and we had it hosted by a friend of mine whose company was just starting out, like, with this web hosting thing. He didn't know what he was going to do. We were his third customer.
Wow.
That company went on to, through like 4 or 5 iterations, and then, over the years when I talked to him, he went from like 4 employees to 50 to 500 to 5,000. We get a call in like mid 2000s, like, who are you? You're on our servers, and we notice you've never paid for web hosting. I'll tell you, buddy.
Yeah, so you're gonna start billing me?
Yeah, exactly. No,
what's my customer number? 3?
Exactly.
Come on. Is 1 and 2 still around? Because if they're not, you got to give me something.
So it was tied to do a major. We've done certainly upgrades, and now when Ellen Davis, our director of marketing, she used this as a great opportunity to put her stamp on things and to add new technology to our website and to add the ability to do live training on it and chat features. And so that's cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. You guys got a nice setup there. Everything seems to be rolling on. But is it weird that your website, so you had that website in '96?
Yeah.
And 25 years later, now you're starting to kind of, it's taken 25 years for everybody in the fire protection industry to start utilizing the internet to this extent.
And it's funny, I've gotten people complimenting us over the years, like how good our stuff has been. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm just riding along on the curve.
Yeah.
I have the advantage sometimes of, I have some tech people in the family, so they bring it up to our attention when we need to do things. But no, it's and I think everyone, I've talked with fellow guys in my role at other companies, and we've had to learn a whole new vernacular of our jobs. I mean, and I've also discovered that some people that are very, very strong at in-person work do not transition really well to over the webinar work. That's been kind of funny to watch. Some people, I've actually listened to some of my own webinars, and I am boring as hell sometimes when I talk.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, you're on my podcast. You can't say that. Jeez.
No, yeah, but that's like, that's you and I having this nice conversation. But Jesus, I listened to one of my 30-minute product presentations, and I literally got done, and I was like, wow, I suck.
You need to have somebody on there to bounce it off of. My first 3 episodes was just me talking. They were like 5 minutes long, but I mean, when the kids can't get to sleep, I throw a couple of the early episodes on and say, all right, just listen for 30 seconds and like a light.
So I use Spotify now, but I used to think podcaster program. And I think I joked with you about this. I had to drive my daughter down to the Outer Banks of the Carolinas last summer. It's about, I don't know, 12 and change to get down there. And then I literally drove down. We had an early dinner, and I turned around and drove back. And I actually went back to podcast 1 for you and listened to all of your podcasts in order all the way up to present day.
Now, be honest now. I mean, you're live. Have they gotten better at all? I hope so. Oh, I hope they've gotten better.
They have gotten markedly better.
Good.
But, and I meant to call you and tell you, like, there are some stories or analogies that you repeat that, and I can't remember right now, but I was like, the next time I talk to Chris, I got to be like, I know about your cousin, man, because you have brought up that dude like 11 times.
You either evolve with the industry or the industry evolves without you is one of my that I use all the time.
So there's a handful of euphemisms that you've used when you're like, oh, okay, now that I've listened to all 63,
Yeah, that guy needs some new shit.
It's all good though.
Yeah, speaking of evolving, man, change your vernacular. Oh.
Well, evolving, I mean, hey, it leads into, I think we took this opportunity, what we had started just before the pandemic, and then because of the pandemic timeframe, we were already in a new product development mode over the last, say, 24 months, maybe 36 months, where we were, designing, introducing, and patenting whole new product lines. And it's
Right.
probably the prolific time frame in our company history. Looking back over, my dad's era of the company, to my era of the company, and some of the things that we've done recently, this is far and away our most prolific time frame is right now. We're probably the most patents issued in the family in the last 24 months that we have in the prior 10, 12 years.
Awesome. And I mean, I would say it's probably not just AGF. I would say probably in the past 5 to 10 years, the industry has completely changed as a whole.
It is.
In the past 5 to 10 years. I know, flex drops and stuff like that have been out for longer than that, but as far as using them, the availability, the better hydraulics, the better flow characteristics, stuff like that through the flex drops has been substantially improved in the past 10 years. Things like 1-inch IGS grooves, even tools and stuff like that that are coming out in this industry right now are just bananas. Like it's just crazy to see how, from an industry that was for 50, 60 years, thread it and put it together, and that's the way we put in pipe, to now we're going skid 10 and grooved couplings, and then we use CPVC, and now we have flexible drops and stuff, pre-assembled flexible drops. And it's it's a timing thing, right? The way I look at it, and some fitters see it two different ways, right? I see it as the faster you can put the pipe in, the more likely they're gonna be to install sprinkler in a property, because the fast is money. The cheaper we can get sprinkler systems to be cost effective wise, not material quality wise, the more likely we're going to see sprinkler in every new home going up, hopefully in the next 10 years.
I just got done. In fact, literally, I was over at the house this morning doing some we retrofitted into, Trish and I moved into a house that was about 35 years old, and we retrofitted the sprinkler system into the house. And Marco Fire Protection here in Exton is the guys that put in the main system, and we had the opportunity to use all Viking the recessed sidewall heads, and use the general their H2O tank.
Yep.
But it was amazing how fast you could put in a system and hide this stuff. And especially with the recessed sidewalls, or not recessed, the concealed sidewalls. The concealed sidewalls, the shit just disappears. Like it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
Minimal holding up on the, putting holes all over the place. And then it was just, me basically running behind them, building soffits. As they're putting the pipe up, I'm putting soffits up right behind them.
So that's what I was going to ask you, is did you use a product like Deco Shield or
I did on my last house. We used Softy Steel on the last.
Yes, Softy Steel.
And great product. In this case, I was able to hide the 43 heads, I think in total. I was able to keep most of them in the walls, so I didn't have a lot of exposed piping because I had it in the corners of closets, and
nice.
I had some dental and crown molding already, so I just had to kind of readjust that. I literally made some walls thicker. I mean, we had some doorway walls where the pipe was running along the at the junction of the ceiling and the wall, so I just made the wall 2 inches thicker, and you've never known it. So it was some tricks like that. But on the in my daughter's bedrooms, where I couldn't get because it was unheated attic, and I ran it in the down in the room. These are the places where I could just build it. So to me, I was just as fast slapping up some wood in a soffit. I didn't even bother to drywall it. I just because you can now with the pre-painted, almost like AZAC board.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I used in my basement. I just got like 1-inch strapping, 1x1 kind of corner board, and put it, I think it was like 4 3/8 out from the outside wall, and ran the sprinkler, 2 3/4 off the wall. Made my own chase. Yeah. Yep. And then here in Canada, what we do, even with the unheated attics, we install in the attics and we insulate. Take all the blown in insulation out, a bat insulation R40 up to, and then put the blown in insulation back over top. We've probably done about 250 houses now that way, and we don't have issues with freeze ups.
I did that in the feed line to one of the bedrooms. I went up into, just because of the way the architecture of the stairs were, there was one area and I did a layover,
Yep.
and and I was fine with that. It's just the one run, it was going to be about a 40-foot run in the attic area.
Yep.
And to get from one side, and I just, I don't mind the pipe in the ceiling, and the girls are never going to notice it. Once I put it in there and hide it and paint it,
Yep.
maybe,
Yeah, we've never had any issues. The only time we have issues with it is when somebody goes up there to move a light and they kick the insulation off and they don't replace it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing you got to remember to do is take the insulation out from underneath. You're not just insulating over top of the pipe.
Right.
Then the heat from the house doesn't go up and warm it. But we always go off on these.
Good. I know. Tough too. Yeah. So
that's why I started getting right into the product. And then I was like, oh, we should probably see how everything's going. 20 minutes later.
sorry.
Hey, it's all good. I love talking to guys like you. It's awesome.
So on the new front, so one of the things that we've been asked for over the years is people say, look, with the popularity of groove pipe, we wish you guys would make a groove test and drain. Everybody in the world uses our test and drains.
Yep.
And I joke with everyone. I said, we introduced the first groove by groove test and drain in 1996. You just never. I'm like, we've always had the model 2500 groove by groove. Just
right.
Everybody knew the model 1000 and the model 1011. They just never asked us for the other version, the groove version. So
right.
we now spent some more time and effort. We actually lengthened the body just recently to make it symmetrical. It was always a design issue for me. I never liked how my dad's original design, the relief valve tube kind of wrapped in a diagonal motion, so that when you have water coming out of the relief valve in certain orientations, the tube would almost have to do a U-turn, and it just wasn't. I never thought it was aesthetically nice, and so when we were redoing the valve and we were making inch and a quarter groove by groove, I added like an 1 3/4 inch length to the valve body, and that gave me symmetrical drains on each side of it that you can see in the picture.
Right. Yeah. Now, what kind of 1-inch groove are you using on these? Are you using Victolic's IGS, or do you have the OGS on it?
I'm old school. That 1-inch IGS, I understand, very popular, and Vic makes a fantastic product. It's their product. They did offer, they said, look, they know the popularity of our test and drains, and they said I was free and clear to make a 1-inch IGS. They were okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, since many, if not most, if not all of the other AGF distributors around the world are not Victolic, and Victolic does make competition to me, I got to tell you, I don't like the idea of proprietary connections.
Agree.
I have an issue, and this isn't Vic's issue, but on our plumbing mechanical product line, our non-fire products, we have had to deal with some issues. There's a thing called ProPress and copper pressing that's used in the plumbing mechanical trade.
Yep.
And there was always a gentleman's agreement that everything would be kind of cross compatible, that 1 through 2 inch was always the same. And then when they did 2.5, 3, and 4, even though there were a few different manufacturers, everything was compatible. And then a valve manufacturer came out and brought out a proprietary connection in 2.5, 3, and 4. But the damn thing looks so similar to the other ones. And I have seen so many contractors get burned when they don't realize it, or maybe the guy in the field doesn't realize it. He runs down to the wholesaler and he just grabs a fitting because he needed 2 more on a job.
Yep.
And it kind of works, but it doesn't kind of work. I was so petrified of that happening. I said, look, we're going old school. We're going to just make a standard ANSI 1-inch groove. Yep. It's been well received, no problems. If Victolic, with their methodologies and their market dominance, I understand if they change the entire industry to their proprietary design, I'll have to make modification. But I've always had this concern of me going, dealing with someone else's proprietary connections.
I do like Victolic. I do use Victolic stuff quite a bit. But the model of finding problems for every solution that they have is not one that I think is going to be accepted well in the industry. listening to the guys in the field as far as these are the problems that we're having, and not saying to the guys in the field, wouldn't this be better?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Listen to the people in the field, don't make the suggestions. And I think, I've had the conversations with them too, is, don't find a solution to problems that don't exist.
Unfortunately, as manufacturers, I think sometimes that happens. Manufacturers produce a product and they go, "Hey, this is the product, and this is the problem." And most of the time, when I talk to guys are like, "I've actually never heard of that ever happening ever."
Yeah, that's never been an issue for mine. Yeah,
and then they're like, "Well, it is for other people," and you're like, "Where?"
Yeah. So is it more? Well, it's a little bit more, but it's going to save you the problem that I don't have.
Exactly. So
Okay.
this, all in though, this has been a new product for us that's been creative. The
Yep.
one that, and I'll see if this one, and I will take for some of this stuff, I'll take no credit on some of these things, because a lot of the feedback we get on product is a contractor or a fitter calling us going, "Hey, I wish you guys would." And then it's me going, "Well, cool, that sounds like a neat idea. Let's see if we can do that."
Yeah.
So a fitter called us and said, "Look, we use your riser packs, like the pre-assembled sectional floor controls."
Yep.
And he goes, "The problem that we have with this and everyone else's sectional floor controls is they're built linear so that everything is 180 degrees, which means we have to make sure we're so many inches down from the ceiling so that we have room to install a gauge, or we have room to put in to take off the cover of the flow switch and all that." And I said, "Okay." And he's like, "So like, I wish we had a more space saving one." And then so that dude's bringing that up, and then he comes back and they said, "We want to put and I'd never even heard of this problem. So that's why I can't take any credit that I created a product and then found the problem. This dude. So
this was an idea that you had. That's good. Yeah. Okay.
the guy comes and he says, "There's something called an ADA, like American with Disabilities Act, an ADA cane sweep. So if there's like a person that has some form of cane or walker or whatever,
Yeah.
you have to be careful of what is in their obstruction area. And there's like a
Right.
certain amount of inches off the floor." And
Yep.
so the way the fitter had said, he said, our issue is if we have a vertical pipe running through a stairwell, we can't have protrusions off of that pipe that hits within the ADA cane sweep area. So it's like, you can't have anything that's like from 12 inches up to like 38 inches that sticks off more than 4 inches.
Yes.
And he's like, "Our problem is if we run that parallel pipe and then we have things off of that pipe even more, we're into this issue." He goes, "So can you just make me a right angle manifold?" I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. We're Santa's workshop for this. I'll make you up in any direction you want."
Yeah.
So we whipped up this thing we call it the corner pack.
Yep.
So everything's at 90-degree angles to each other.
So do you have this available with, say, both swings, so that you've got you've got it on the flow switch on the left in the picture that we're looking at here? Is it available flow switch on the right, so the test and drains on the opposite side?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
And it's truth be told, here's a perfect example that in two circumstances, these were both from the field fitters calling us going, "I wish you guys would make." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, man." And like, if you look in the upper left corner of that, you'll see the gauge, and there's the three-way valve that the valve is inverted in this picture. And that was like another thing. And I don't know if I'd mentioned this to you before. Like, it always pissed me off when I'd go into a job site and I'd see the little 1/4-inch three-way valve that people put on gauges with the handle backwards. And it'd be like against the wall. And you ask the fitter, he's like, "Yeah, we do it all the time." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Well, we have to, because the handles are made at a 90-degree angle to the inlet and the outlet and the test connection on all three of the valves." I'm like, "Yeah, but they don't have to be. You can make that thing in a cross." So we whipped that up, that cross pattern.
Yep.
And it costs like an extra 38 cents. And I'm like, okay, everybody's been putting valve handles backwards for probably decades, versus somebody going, "Well, why not just do it this other way?"
There's always the problem, again, getting back to the things that I always say, right? There's always easier ways of doing it, but the problem with the industry is it's stuck in its ways of, "I've done it this way. This is how it gets done.
Yeah.
This is the way we do it." But it doesn't have to be the way you do it. You can come up with solutions to problems that exist. Actually having somebody call and say, hey, this is what I'm running into, this is what I need to see. And then boom, yeah, we can do that.
So one of the new issues, and this is, so I was just on, I don't know, if, my hope is a lot of your followers, especially, you know, of course, the followers in Canada, are CASA has this like engineer forum they've been doing. I don't know exactly what Jason Ratham calls it, but like these guys get on it, it's at like 1 o'clock, and it's been like once a month.
Yep.
And they throw out all these like great engineering topics, and I have learned a lot about some of the say requirements in the Canadian market. So I think there's different jurisdictions in Canada are just starting to come. Most are on 2013 NFPA 13.
That's right. Yep. That's what Ontario, which is where I'm from, we're on the 2013 edition of NFPA 13.
But then I think 2016 is coming in a lot of areas where people are talking about it.
They're talking about it, but the building code in Ontario doesn't get updated, I think, until 2025. So
Right.
Maybe by then they'll go to 2016.
Or they'll jump. Would they jump a couple?
Yeah, they probably would. I'm hoping they go to at least 2019. By the time it gets released, they might be 2022. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know as much. Jason Rickman from CASA. Rickman. Yep, great guy.
Yeah, really
Great guy. Yeah,
really, and just a nice group of guys to talk to once a month.
Yeah. Yep.
So the reason I brought that up is because one of the things we're dealing with in the States is now all wet systems have to have air vents on them. Since
Right.
since 2016 forward has got to have these air vents. And one that we introduced that's been real popular with fitters and contractors is this one that we pre-assemble onto end caps. And
Okay.
the reason we do it is, again, a fitter. This was actually a contractor in California. He came to me and said, look, you know, we got to put in these air vents, but the problem is what's available right now on the market are these big contraptions of pipe that it takes up a height issue. And I'm like, well, why do you give a shit? It's above the pipe. And he said, no, he said, our concern is when we do these big ESFR systems,
Right.
we have a pretty tight tolerance area that from the top of the pipe to the bottom of the roof deck, he's like, I need to be within like 7 inches. And I'm like, wow, that's like so incredibly small. So we created this end cap version, and we got the installed height from the top of the pipe to the bottom of the roof deck is under 5 inches. It's 4 7/8 inches.
Okay.
So it's far and away the tiniest air vent that you can put on a wet system.
And how do these operate? Like, what's the general, like, I mean, I'm assuming like a float?
Yeah. So it's a really simple, the technology's like around forever. It's how you modify what's inside the thing. But if you think about the simplicity of a fluid flush master, that's really what this is. Conically shaped fluid flush master. As air escapes, there is a buoyant float that in the case of ours specifically, inside that conical shape is this singular float that has a hole down the center of it with a bar in it. And as that float goes up, that pulls down on the bar, and the bar kind of closes the trap door at the top, which seals it at the top, but it's really sealing it at the bottom because that's the bar going down.
Right.
And then below that, we don't really have a cutaway of it in this slide. If you start at below the unit, we put a 1-inch isolation valve on it because you never know what and if you may have to do something on the system. So we looked at it and said, well, different people are saying you should do it. We recommend it. I'm like, well, we're just going to build it into it. And then we put in a lot of other companies were doing Y strainers that are popular in like the plumbing mechanical one. I hate them. They clog the path. So we made the whole body of our product a screen, like in between the two valves is a 25 millimeter mesh screen. And then, one of the things is if you have a strainer, you have to have accommodation for cleaning it out. I mean, NFPA 25 says, every 5 years, flush, clean, and observe that the strainer's clean. So I'm like, why would we put in a strainer and then not accommodate dealing with this shit that could get in the strainer? So that's why we add the garden hose cap and chain valve.
Which is.
I mean, it's just common sense.
Yeah.
And then the air vent, we did different than everybody else. Everybody else kind of took something from the boiler industry. We went a little different, and so, well, let's make this thing. We call it the bubble breaker. It has like a little propeller in the bottom of it that has slits in it, so that high air volume gets goes through and around our float mechanism, and it goes through the bubble breaker, and then that is one whole sealed chamber. So we don't have any issue of ours spitting water the way other ones do, because our sealed mechanism is at the bottom. So we don't collect water at the top like the other ones do, which then spits out the water. All our stuff is trapped at the bottom. So everyone, people say, oh, these things, they leak, they spit water. I said, no, the one you have experience with does. That's why we redesigned it, and don't do that. We designed ours specific for fire protection, not a wet environment product from the boiler industry. So
now, how I'm assuming you install this onto your system, and you're good to 200-pound test against it and everything like that?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, no problems there. I mean, they're all
help your 200-pound test too.
What was that?
It would help your 200-pound test too, with getting the help them bleed all the water. There you go. There's a cutout picture right there on your website.
There was a contractor called us from Connecticut, and again, fitter feedback is like, we live off that. So a guy called and he said, they put this in, and his big thing was he was using them as a vacuum breaker. They were doing these distribution centers, and he said invariably they would be filling the systems, running some tests, but then they'd have to drain them down. And he goes, you drain these big distribution centers, and they drain, and they take a while to drain. And he said sometimes you almost like pull a vacuum on the drain, and it'll dislodge a coupling. Then when you go to refill the system, you're going around and dealing with some issues. So his big thing was he opens up the garden hose cap and chain valve when they go to drain a system. He says his systems drain so much faster now. They got a 1-inch line right through the product.
Nice.
So
I've seen it happen on the reducing couplings, where you're draining a system and it dislodges the reducing coupling, but I've never seen it on a regular coupling before. Oh, that's nuts.
Yeah. So that was, law of unintended consequences. You basically can fill and drain a system much faster having these products.
Right.
And then this was one of the most recent things. We had a person call us and say, how do I know if your air vent works? So Ben sat down and he's like, well, that's actually a really cool question. So he made what we call the validator. And I love the names. I literally crack up at some of the names. I mean, I wanted to call our air vents the burp and fart, but that didn't go over.
The marketing department maybe shut that one down.
I was like, nah. I mean, it's not like everybody has Testy McSprinkles, our mascot.
It's fantastic. Absolutely.
Exactly.
It's the best.
So Ben comes out with this thing, and he's like, I'm going to make this thing called the validator. And it's like the simplest little kit we sell in a box. You can hook up this product to our air vent and use one of those canned airs, you clean a keyboard with.
Yep.
And it'll basically go off it'll set our air vent off like a train whistle. So you can backwards air, and we're the only product out on the market that you can actually verify that our air vents work.
So how does it work going backwards though?
You go through the connection, the garden hose cap and chain connection.
Oh, through the garden hose connection. Oh, okay. Yeah. Because it would be doing the thing.
So you turn off the main valve, you go through the garden hose cap and chain connection, you have the connection at the top of the unit, and then air goes through. So, and we make both a mechanical as well as an electronic alarm that you can attach to these devices that will literally, if it's mechanical, it's got a flag that would go up to tell you if the air vent wasn't working right. Right. And we have a mechanical one that would chirp and blink that the thing's not working right.
Oh, okay. Is that what I'm looking at here with the, oh no, this is the water. Yeah, this would be the 7920. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, what I think all of these, hey, I've got a lot of great creative people I work with here, but it's a lot of times it's somebody calling us in the field or making a comment, or, you're in a webinar and then somebody writes in a comment in the webinar, like, I'm going to put your air vent in, but how do I know the damn thing works? And then it's like, well, that's totally a good question.
Yeah.
what do we make? How can we give somebody some product or some solution? I don't know what the hell the problem is in the field. You tell
Yeah.
me what you have. I'll figure out how to deal with it.
Now, do you have a lot of them that aren't that come back faulty from the original manufacturer? Like, do you have a statistic for that?
We've had no returns as of yet.
Okay,
None.
there you go.
Thousands sold, and
Thousand.
thousands sold, and we haven't had a single one. Now,
Awesome.
what I have, there are some issues that I would say it had nothing to do with the product as much as it sometimes has things to do with orientation. And I'm huge on somebody going, somebody calls, well, dude, this isn't working right. I'm like, hey man, can you send me a cell phone picture of it? Like, and this happens a lot with relief valves. And I'll be like, well, I totally can see why it's not working. You put the relief valve into the sight glass connection, so it's not actually attached to the system, and it's downstream of the ball. It's not gonna do anything.
Yeah, it's not gonna go. Yeah, it's not feeling any pressure, so it's working perfect.
Right. So with some of the air vents, I was on a job site on the West Coast, and the person had fed the air vents from an arm under configuration.
So going to an obstruction?
Well, no. So I mean, you had a branch line, and where you sometimes would have an arm under, for your swing. Well, they used that same connection methodology because they probably had gotten fabricated pipe.
Yep.
So they just put their connection off the welder that came out with a 90, came over with like a 12-inch nipple, and then attached an air vent. And
so it was on the lowest part of the system.
It's full of water. The minute I said, well, dude, you're not going to get any air out of this. He's like, well, why not? I said, because you fed it, in the handbook in NFPA 13 in the note section, it specifically said air vents, it's a should. There's two important shalls. You shall put a single one in, and you shall locate it near a high point. And then you should locate it on the top of a horizontal line of pipe.
I mean,
so
why doesn't your product suck the air out of the system is basically what the guy was asking you.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Where do I plug this thing in?
And I'll get shit from people sometime when I'm talking about it, and they'll say, well, where do I have to put it? I have to put it at the highest point. I said, no, the committee they threw you a bone on this one. They just said, look, you only got to put one in, regardless if you think the effectiveness or not. You only got to go with one. And two, they made it they made it ambiguous. They said you can put it near a high point. So they left some flexibility, because putting it at the highest point may be a very bad location to put it. It's just difficult to get to, ineffective. If you're a Walmart grocery store that has the highest point right at the inbound supply of the system, it's just a bad location. It's not, you're never going to get to it. So, they did throw a bone on that for its effectiveness. And I also love in the handbook, they put, you should locate the air vent where it'll be effective. I want to be the guy in the committee that goes, I want that in the wording, because I want to put in there sometime, we'll put it where it's ineffective.
Yeah. I want one standard to say, this is an ineffective look. Well, that's essentially where they're talking about locations of gauges on drains.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only, I think that's one of the only cases in NFPA where it says, whatever you do, don't put it here. Right.
Thankfully, I don't have to deal with the gauge side of the world a lot. We make a standard, bourbon tube style gauge that's a total commodity. Yep. But I feel for the people sometimes when it comes to some of the issues with was it plus or minus 1%?
3%. Or no, it's 1%. Yes, it is 1%, which comes out to being 3 PSI plus minus over the 300-pound gauge.
And then there's somewhere else in code that it does say 3%, which makes it, plus or minus 10. And you sit down and go, well, which one do you want me to follow?
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty, damn it, I grabbed 13 and not 25. I grabbed the wrong book when I rolled over. I was going to look up, I'm pretty sure it is 3%. When you're doing a 25, when you're doing your inspection of 25, it's got to be within 3% of the overall gauge size.
Right.
So on wet systems, you typically put a 300-pound gauge on it. You're allowed to be within 3% of that plus minus, which is 9 psi over the size of the gauge. So that's a huge
swing.
That's a big swing, right?
So thankfully, I don't have to deal with that side of the equation a whole lot.
People smarter than me made that decision.
There are some really smart guys that can argue back and forth on that one 5 different ways. I'm like, hey, you're gonna win that one. I'm not gonna say it.
I've had a lot of conversations with people, not about that one specifically, but about verifying valves are open when you do when you're doing your 25s. You have to shut the valve. You have to verify the valve's been open by doing a 2-inch drain test. But it's worded as verify by flowing, but it doesn't say how do you verify without actually doing a 2-inch drain test. You need to provide the documentation, right?
And all of that wording is now in the new versions of 13 and the new versions of 25 that are being discussed. All of that say that the action verb in that sentence is being changed, because now that you have electronic ways of performing many of these tests.
Yep.
Do you witness an inspection or do you perform an inspection? Do you witness flow or do you initiate flow?
Is that the conversation that's coming out with the virtual inspections that are kind of coming into fruition?
It is. I can tell you from sitting in on, probably one of the best organizations in the industry is NFSA's E&S committee. And this is where you have kind of the top minds in the whole industry looking at the code going, okay, look, the language says right now that you have to witness and witness an inspection by the performance and actuation of a valve. And you have to literally look at the sentence on a grammatical level to go, well, what if you have initiated the flow through the valve electronically? You're not actually witnessing the flow through the valve. You're literally witnessing the result after the water has flowed through the valve.
That's right.
You can't initiate that test because you pushed a button. You're nowhere near the damn thing. So
that's right.
That was just a topic of conversation that in the E&S that they talked about, how all of the wording of how we interact with a system is under review now. The verbs are under review.
Especially because of the remote inspections that are coming out and the capabilities of performing remote inspections, where I haven't seen it, I haven't done it, but I've heard of people, especially when COVID started coming out, of the building owner FaceTiming an inspector.
Yeah.
And just like, okay, I need you to, looking at the system, I need you to holding the phone up, I need you to, point the camera at that valve, flow the water. Oh, there's my wife in the background. You know what I mean? Things like that, right? Like, show me the screen that says you're flowing water. There's there's the residual, there's the static, things like that, right? It's going to go really crazy with the way I think inspections are going to be done, and with that, are the prices of inspections going to go down? You still have the time of an inspector sitting, viewing the screen, watching it. Who takes liability at that point? There's a lot of things that I don't know about it, but I'm also not on the committee. So,
and I have a very limited tunnel vision amount of knowledge when it comes to this stuff. I spent my entire career in valves, and I don't know a lot of the nuances of other aspects of the system. But one of the things I kind of argued with is there have been in the recent past languages submitted that any action that you could perform electronically was a satisfactory replacement for action you could be doing manually. And I immediately kind of jumped up and like, hold it. I don't like the idea that you completely remove the manual human factor from a lot of these things, because there's more at play than just turning a valve handle. There is someone doing multiple issues. And if you said, well, anything you can do electronically, I was dead set against that. And when they have modified 13 to allow for remote inspection, and they've made modifications in 25 for the ongoing maintenance of systems, one of the compromises that I was adamantly behind was, every third time in a cycle of test has to be a manual. You have to still have that manual functionality, because what if you have a catastrophic electronic failure of a system? And everyone's like, well, it'll always fail to this mode. Really? I mean, if we can't even guarantee the manual function on sometimes, now you're going to put a whole nother layer that
That's
you want
right.
to put. So I understand it. We make a remote control test and drain. We've had it for decades. The Model 1200 remote test. We introduced it specifically for the contractors that said, look, I have to put an inspector's test in this location, and then it's inconvenient for me to get to it. So I need that ancillary control ability I still want it to be a test and drain, but I also want to be able to remotely activate. I was like, okay, great. But we didn't totally remove the capacity of it.
Right.
And I will, to my dying day, I will say, look, I understand remote ability, and I'm gonna go into something that is somewhat controversial in a second here, but there has to be some manual control. So
I think the 3 years or third time is a perfect, because it lines up with the standard for dry system tripping of every 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can do a partial trip of the dry system, and then every 3 years you have to do a full trip of the dry system.
Right.
It's in line with that, and I think that's a good idea.
So I mean, I understand advancement. I'm a manufacturer. We get it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have a roots in going no. The field is the important driver in a bus here, and they're the ones that really give us the best feedback on products. And yeah, we could make everything electronic. I don't think we should. There's a lot of things you can do. There's some stupid shit you shouldn't do.
Agree, 100% agree. Right? Again, gets back to the finding problems to solutions, or finding solutions to problems that don't exist. Right?
Right. So go.
Yeah.
I'll jump to a product that everyone had to deal with. Canada never seems to deal with this, but our collect and drains. I joke when I was been with that CASA firm, I'm like, I don't understand why I never ever hear about any fire sprinkler systems in Canada freezing and breaking, but down in America, I mean, it seems like we freeze and break shit constantly. Something about our northern neighbor.
I'd say we do. We constantly do have systems freezing up. But I will say, I think, and I mean, it's the same with the fitters in northern Michigan and Wisconsin and in areas like that, where we're expecting the cold weather, right? Texas, nobody was expecting Texas to freeze to the extent that it did. Like, I mean, nobody was expecting Texas to freeze like that, right? They were 100% not prepared, and I get it. It's never cold there, right? It doesn't freeze. That's fair, right? That would have caught me off guard too, right? Like, I mean, if we got a heat wave in the middle, I shouldn't say that because we get those actually quite a bit where I'm from. Anyways, but the preventative maintenance, I think, on sprinkler systems in Canada here is a little bit more common, because we know every year usually after October, like the mid-October, we start getting freezing months, right? And it's going to freeze. You could potentially have freezing up until May. You could have snowfall up until May. Those are our months of winter, is October to May. So, be ready for the service calls, keep your stuff winterized, and, pack a lunch, because at any time during those months, you could be on a freeze up for a service call.
So, I mean, that really is, that is what, because people say, well, why they're like, what is the genesis of collect and drain? What, why and the what? And I said, look, systems freeze and break, and it's an area where I don't think we we've had this proliferation of sprinkler systems and dry systems specifically. And with that installation of dry systems comes some more preventative maintenance. You got to deal with, the compressor, and you have to deal with making sure what's going on with moisture in the system. And it also gets down to just the fundamental issue of, you have to make sure, if you even have any moisture in the system, got to get the moisture out no matter what.
Right.
So, where I think for many, many, many years, people just accepted the fact you had to do all this. I said, well, you could for relatively simple money, you can solve some of these issues. And that's so 5-6 years ago, when we introduced the first versions of all the collect and drain products, people were like, I think to some extent people are like, I'm surprised it's taken this long for somebody to come up with something as simple as just telling me which low point drain has water in it.
Right.
And then you talk to your field service guy, and he's like, yeah, we just go around and check them all. I was like, what a pain in the ass. I don't want to do that. I was like, just go to the one that's telling you it has water in it. And then, so this year, where I'd say, we took the first several years and we took all the feedback that we were getting from all the different installations, and then we're like, okay, what's the field saying that they want? And one of the big things they wanted, they just said, okay, can you just make us a self-draining low point drain? Like, and we made two versions of it. The first version, and we call it self-maintaining. I hope it's kind of visible on the screen. How this works, and it's incredibly simple. So you have a heated, heavily insulated cabinet, and what happens is when the water collects to about 75% of its volume, the water's redirected to a little drip belt. So for every drip into the unit, a drip drops out of the unit. So we maintain air integrity above the belt.
Okay.
Then it's on the other side of a check valve, so you don't ever have to worry about a back siphon there or an air leak that you would trip your dry valve. But the simplicity of the product is for every drip in, a drip drops out.
Yep.
So, and you have brought it to its own heated environment. So if you have an area where you're like, look, I'm going to have these low point drains. They're going to be in these, say, exterior facilities. They're in some form of maintenance facility. They're in a sports facility. They're in an equestrian facility. They're in a remote parking garage. They're in a pump house. There's something that's not going to get a lot of attention. You're like, I don't ever want to have to deal with this drum drip again.
Right.
This is it. I mean,
are these things like, does it go to a fire alarm panel or does it just chirp?
So you have both. So it'll chirp and blink. Say you did trip the system and the system filled beyond its capacity of dripping. Okay, so
right.
You had a system trip. Well, the minute there's still a float switch above this unit. So what happens is if it gets that onslaught of water, well, that's going to trip the float, and then the float's going to start the chirping and the blinking, and it has dry contacts to tell the panel, hey, we've had a tripping in the system. Besides, the dry valve and all of its redundancies are going to be telling you've had a system. This would also tell you.
Right. But if you have a buildup of water accumulation in the collect and drain,
yeah,
will it give you an alert? Collect and drain number 47 has a,
no.
is nothing. But it's in a heated environment, so it really doesn't matter as long as you're doing your regular preventative maintenance, anyways.
It's in a heated environment, and it's self-maintaining itself. So as long as it's a low volume of water coming into the unit, like condensation.
Yep.
For every drip in, a drip drops out. So it's almost like having the amount of water that you have in a priming pump. You always have that little amount of prime water there.
Yep.
This is the same concept of it. We're always going to have that, basically about 20 ounces of water in the priming chamber, and that the water then diverts over to the bell drip.
Huh. I mean, I think it's a good idea there. Do you ever have any issues with, obviously these are going to be installed in cold environments. Do you have ever had any issues where small drips, death by 1,000 cuts, where the ice accumulates and builds up into the unit and kind of well, no, because that's what I guess the alarm's for. Once the water can't drip out anymore, if it freezes,
the water volume would
go in and it's going to trip.
Right. So there's a fail safe on that.
Yep.
The issues we sometimes have is that someone doesn't, the number one issue, ironically enough, the number one issue is people forget to actually run power to the unit. And the couple of the product issues that we've had to call is somebody calling me and saying, look, this thing, it froze and broke. And I'm like, holy shit. And then they send me a cell phone picture and I'm like, okay, I see the piping feeding the unit. Where's the electrical line feeding it? What electrical line? Well, how did you think the heater's going to work? So,
Bluetooth?
Yeah. So that has been an issue. We now have a big orange sticker that tells you have to run power to the unit. And
That's
it's
fair.
not like you have to run dedicated power. Just a regular 110 can run dozens of these things. It runs off microamps.
Right.
But what we have seen sometimes is someone still, even though this thing and its brothers, the 5400, the original just heated cabinet version of it that didn't, collected water, is in the 5400, it was a heated cabinet. If it filled full of water, it's going to chirp, it's going to blink, it's going to tell you it's full of water. But if you still choose to ignore it and the water level goes above the cabinet, you have now crossed out of the heated environment.
Right.
So, I kind of tell people, and this is what really led to a product like this, is somebody going, well, what if my guys don't get to it in time and it's full and it's told me it's full, but I still don't get to it? I'm like, well, okay. And then the guy's like, you've got to make a version that just drains. So this was, and we had to do it mechanically. That was the other challenge to engineering, was I wanted it to be a mechanical drain for this product.
Right. Is that electrical failure? Like reduce the chance of electrical?
Exactly. So then we created this. This is the all electronic version.
Okay.
And this one came from actually more from the building owning side of the equation. We had a few different wholesale and large retail customers come to us and say, look, we have low point drains in our distribution centers and in our stores by our garden centers, and we want the ability to, on our control, like we want to know when these things are full, we want to know when they drain, we want to be able to just hit a button in our center location and do it on a Tuesday when we want to do it, not wait till someone calls. So the controller board that we put into this, you can put it into full automatic mode. So when the float switch senses it's full, it just closes the top electric motor valve. Once it senses that's closed, it opens the bottom electric motor valve. It drains the unit all the way down. Once it senses it's empty, it closes the bottom one and reopens the top. So that's full automatic mode. I'm full, empty me.
Yep.
Then there's semi-automatic mode. Semi-automatic mode, I don't want to turn the valve. I just want somebody to push a button, and they can initiate it from pushing the button on the unit.
Right.
Or
that's the one that's shown on the website here.
Yeah.
With the drain button. Okay.
So the concept there is you can have the thing in semi-automatic mode, fully automatic mode. It has the ability to be, like, we have one customer who has purchased many of these, and their facility in Atlanta, they're draining low point drains in buildings around the country. They just hit a button and that thing does their building in Tennessee, and it does their building in Kansas, and it does their building in Boston. And they know in Atlanta that they're the ones that did it.
That's awesome.
So, again, it was people from the field coming back going, okay, just make this thing, give us this flexibility.
Right.
Cabinet wise, controller wise, plumbing wise, pipe wise, heater wise, there's a lot of cross, use of product for us. But I think it shows how responsive we can be to people. And then this was the one that I wish we had with what happened in Texas. And to me, this is a game-changing level product.
The Flood Eliminator, yeah.
And I think this is something that if I was putting in a new system, and we've already retrofitted ours, so I've got experience. I would put this on every low point drain or every 1 inch, little bypass valve, little clean out valve I've got, because the concept on this one in its most simplest form, in a low point drain where your bottom valve is closed and your top valve is open, you have a certain amount of air pressure in that chamber. And then you have, as long as you have that air pressure below the unit and an air pressure above the unit, this thing is fine. And water comes right through this unit, just drips right through it. If you have a loss of the pressure below this unit and water under pressure hitting the inlet of this unit, then it's gonna snap closed. And it doesn't snap all the way closed. It actually still allows about 8 ounces of water a minute to come out of it. But what it doesn't allow is 20 gallons of water a minute,
Right.
like you would is if you froze and broke the pipe under it.
Yeah.
So the whole concept here is all these people that, their low point drains freeze and break,
Yep.
snap off, and then they sit there and flow for however long, maybe it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I mean, I'm assuming you've dealt with jobs that have flowed for a while.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep.
our whole thing is, can we have something that stops that catastrophic flooding? So that's why we called it Flood Eliminator. It does not prevent. So, initially somebody looks at that and they go, okay, but what happens when I want to drain down the system? I'm removing the air pressure underneath the unit. I have water coming through the unit. You're going to make my drain longer. It's not the case. That's not how this thing works. That's that spring that you see in there.
Right.
If you are using this in a drain down, like you've done your 3-year trip test and you're using it in a drain down, well, the water that's draining through the system is not under pressure. It's because it has air behind it.
Right.
So
right.
it's draining out at atmospheric pressure because you're draining down. So you've
So
drained. Go ahead.
what's the pressure that's on this spring? What's the difference between that? Because if you have like a, let's say you got a 30, 40 foot warehouse, is it 10, 15 PSI where the elevation of water pushing down could potentially seal it? Not seal it entirely, but.
So we did, a perfect example. I to be honest with you, I don't know the exact amount of foot-pounds of head pressure behind the unit, but that question came up. So I had Ben and Mike make me a 22-foot tall piece of pipe, and we put this on the green at the bottom of it. So I had 22 feet of water above this unit full, and then when I open this unit, but that water that's above it is not under pressure.
Right.
So what would happen initially would open, you would hear like it would go like pop pop, like it was opening like initially, and then it was reacting, and then it was just staying open. So we drained that 20-foot piece of 1-inch pipe, feeding it in 8.5 seconds. So
all right, so it was open. It was wide open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After that initial spring reaction of it opening, closing, opening, once it senses it's not water under pressure, which would keep it closed because it's being fed from the system. The supply is, the dry valve is tripped and that water is rushing in and it is under pressure, be it 20 or 30 PSI or whatever the hell, or 60, whatever they're hitting it with. That thing will stay in that closed position. As long as there's no pressure behind it, it'll act like a regular drain valve. And you just think about all the different scenarios where people have had these flooding conditions, and you just need a simple valve like this.
Now it says coming soon on your website. When are you?
That needs to be updated. So
okay, it is available now.
Yeah. So we've taken our first. We actually, when Texas hit, we were all out in the warehouse, myself included. We were making low point drains, round the clock pretty much. And we shipped thousands and thousands of low point drains to the Texas Panhandle area. We have been making these as fast as we can, and I think the first round of shipments of these are all going out in the next couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, okay.
So I mean, we've got orders for the first production runs, things like that.
Awesome. That is a ton of products. If you have more, I think we're over an hour now. I think we're gonna have to probably do another episode if you have another batch of stuff to go through. That was a ton of information. I'm super excited to see what else you guys come out with in the future here. I'm assuming you guys are going to start looking into, you've already got the automatic testing valves and stuff like that available, but what do you guys have coming out here in the near future? What's next on the horizon?
It's going to be something down that route. We've got a couple that we are working on right now. We started the first round of building some prototypes.
Okay.
Of combining some products, and we've seen some of the recent innovations some other manufacturers have put together, and we've seen the positives of them and we've seen the negatives of them. I think there is There's some markets that are ripe for, I know we've always done it this way, and we've always done it with the products in between control valves and check valves and flow switches and test and drains, and I know that's how we have done it. But what if we thought completely differently?
Right.
Why do we have to see the pressure of water this way, or the flow of water, or control water in this method? What if we were to do this or that? My father, before he passed away, and I don't know if I ever mentioned this, he had what I thought was a brilliant idea, and we have it patented. He actually patented the concept of a paddle type flow switch built into the hollow airspace of a ball valve, because a ball, although the ball is the sealing mechanism at, say, at 9 and 3 o'clock, if I'm flowing left to right,
Yeah.
well, the airspace inside that ball, the volume of the ball, it does nothing. It never changes. It's always the same sphere inside the ball.
Right.
And that sphere can be under pressure or not under pressure. It can sense flow or not sense flow. And he patented a whole series of products based off the concept of what you could and couldn't do with both a butterfly and a ball. And we have that.
You would essentially be shrinking the size of a riser manifold from, say, 2 to 3 feet to inches.
We got it down at about 9 inches.
That's a good one.
That one is switching a valve, and then we've kind of dusted off some stuff that, and I don't know that this will ever get legs. So if anybody in the backflow world wants to have a chat, the same concept that a sprinkler system tends to be a static system, and if it is, why do we have to put a double check backflow preventer with 2 isolation valves feeding into another product that is a check valve? Because I got 3 damn check valves. Why can't a backflow preventer and an alarm valve be married together into a single product?
So the only issue I see with that is in an area with multiple headers. Like if you have a single incoming water supply, you're doing a small commercial property or something like that. I see that's a good idea, right? There's a market for that for sure. Anything with multiple zones though, you would now have to have like a potable water header, stainless steel or something, copper or something like that for the header for multiple zones.
But so that's something we've been messing around with, and then I don't know. I mean, they some of the times we get some great phone calls.
Right.
We've got a completely new idea of a relief valve coming out.
Okay.
It is still a relief valve. It has an inlet, it has an outlet, but we got to mess with the architecture of the seat concept, and I can tell you, you'll see it in just probably a month or so. I had so much fun with it. We made it so that the housing, you can attach Legos to it for fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Because
take your kid to work day just gets to a whole new level.
Right. I was like, when we looked at it, I was like, well, can we redesign it so it has 2 pegs? And then we made it so I can hook Legos to it. Joy of a small company.
That's awesome. I'm gonna go. I think there's a place online that you can make custom Lego figures that look like you.
Yep.
I'm just gonna do that, and I'm gonna crazy glue them to every one of those that I come to. So you can't take me off. I'm just present in there'll be a Fire Sprinkler Podcast logo on the shirt and everything.
I'm all for it. So I think there's some fun things. AGF has been a really a fun company. I think we're pretty. I mean, hey, again, to make a joke about our mascot, the Testing McSprinkles mascot, I think people still piss themselves laughing at Testing McSprinkles.
Every time it pops up on Twitter. Like, look at this, look at this guy.
His Instagram feed, and I can tell you, when I am back to traveling, I just did probably 4 flights in the last 2 weeks, which is 4 flights finally, and I'm used to traveling 4 or 5 times a week.
Right.
But I would say once I am back on the road, my hope is that you will start to see Testing McSprinkles in a variety of exotic locations.
I look forward to I'll put a spot on the shelf for him if you get multiples made up.
And like you, I don't know, we try and get the word out. If people see our products in the field, and I think everybody sees them to some extent, if you
Yep.
send us a photo of like a test and drain or a riser pack or a collect and drain, and they send it to us on social media, we'll send you like AGF swag, like our hats,
Yeah.
our camo hats. So if you ever see AGF products, and you can send us a picture on social media platforms like TikTok or Instagram and Facebook and all that, we always like to send swag out to the field.
Awesome. And you do. My wife actually, we were doing laundry just the other day, and that was the first time. I mean, you sent me a package about a year ago with shirts and hats and the masks and stuff like that. And that was the first time she saw. I think that I have 4 of your shirts that are in constant rotation, and she was like, "You have more than one of this." I was like, "Yeah." And you wear. I just thought you wore the same shirt all the damn time. Do you know how relieved I am? I was like, it's been a year. I've been wearing this shirt constantly for a year. And she was like, oh, I honestly thought you were just wearing the same shirt like for 3 days in a row.
Trisha's banned some of the clothes, like she's, because we have some of the clothes that we give out as swag, and then we have some of the stuff that's just here.
Yeah.
And I remember and Ellen absolutely refused to get this. So like, to me, I'm gonna I wanted to make terry cloth bath shorts, like the most comfortable pair of clothes I've ever owned in my life. Where they were the same materials, like a super thick bath towel, but they were shorts with pockets.
Yep.
And I wanted to get AGF logoed terry cloth bath shorts.
You don't need that kind of negativity in your life. You do those, and you send me a large, and I'll rock them.
I wish I was a large. So,
Awesome.
well, hey, I love these talks.
I always have a great time talking to you. I don't think we've had a conversation that didn't last 45 minutes. I think we're going on an hour and a half, and you bring the average length of the podcast episode from around 25 to 35 minutes up to about 65 minutes. I always love you having on, and anytime you want to come on and talk about these new products, reach out.
Thank you, Chris, very much. Hope everybody has a great day.
Yeah, and hopefully we see you at some of these trade shows once they start rocking and rolling again.
Finally traveling.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on again.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey everyone, this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast is done. If you liked this episode, leave a review, comment, or hop over to my social media pages and let me know. Just search Fire Sprinkler Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't forget to hashtag Fire Sprinkler Podcast and anything you think I should know about or see. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast, email info@firesprinklerpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Take care.